It's 3:25 in the morning in Dhaka. It's raining, obviously. Behind us, workers are still working, garment workers. They're going into their 20th hour of work. We've seen this in a drive around Dhaka. We've seen this in maybe a dozen factories tonight. These workers will work until 5 or 6, maybe they'll get an hour of sleep, and then they'll start another shift, which will be 14, 15, or 18, or 19, or 20 hours. It's hard to imagine that in the United States, it's August. People are on vacations. It's August in Bangladesh, and these workers are working 20 hours a day, making our clothing.
In some factories, they have to work 15 to 20 nights a month, often until 3 a.m. or later. The women are separated from their families, especially the ones that have children, and this creates a lot of problems.
American corporations are seeking out the cheapest labor. And right now we have 2.8 billion people around the world who are making products for Americans to buy, living off of less than $2 a day. The people making the goods that Americans buy are mainly young women in countries like Bangladesh, Central America, and places like China, where they're making pennies an hour, working 12, 14-hour days, sometimes 20 hours a day, and often they're beaten to keep them working so that we can pay less for what we buy.
We saw a lot of clothing for Wal-Mart. The general working day is from 7:30 in the morning till 9:30 or 10:30 at night. Sometimes we have to work all day and night.
They told us how they're often locked into the factories. They're forced to do unpaid overtime, receive no sick pay and no holiday pay. They live in terrible conditions, often without any running water or sanitation.
At 3 a.m. we can sleep on the ground in the factory, but we have to start working again at 7:30 a.m. There is no opportunity to go home. The whole month working night and day. If there is any stop in the work, they start yelling. If we do anything, they start beating us. Almost torture. They go too far.
But in this factory that was producing for Wal-Mart, we know the conditions were brutal. The workers were forced to work from 8 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, or 11 o'clock, 14, 15 hours a day. They work in 7 days a week. They hadn't had a day off in the last 9 weeks. The workers were paid 11 to 17 cents an hour. They were beaten, slapped, screamed at, cursed at to work faster, to reach their production goals. They have absolutely no rights. If they try to defend themselves, they're attacked, fired, beaten. They were paid 6 cents for every $19.97 Wal-Mart shirt they made. How do you think Wal-Mart sells those goods for such low prices?
It's amazing that Wal-Mart was the company at one time that was urging people to buy American, and now they're the largest importer of Chinese goods, and the Chinese are one of the worst slave labor countries in the world. We're buying the goods and at the same time ignoring what's happening in these countries around the world under these sweatshop conditions. Americans generally have been silent on this issue.
Would be about a day and a half worth of work for the maquiladora worker. Campbell's soup, this would be another day and a half's worth of work. In other words, the workers in Honduras are not earning enough to purchase even these simple U.S. products. So you lose at both ends. You lose jobs at one end, you have falling wages at one end, our end. At the other end, you can't trade. There's no one to trade with. You can't trade with someone making 38 cents an hour.
Disney, Wal-Mart, and the other U.S. companies try to tell the American people that we shouldn't get confused, that 11 to 17 cents an hour might not seem like a lot of money in the U.S., but don't forget, we are talking about Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world. In Bangladesh, they say, you can live fine on 11 to 17 cents an hour. But a visit to the homes of the workers shows what a cruel lie this really is. The workers are trapped in abject misery, living in tiny, one-room, 10 by 12-foot huts. Their houses are put together with thatch, scraps of metal, wood, plastic, and cardboard. Often they have dirt floors, and others are built over pools of stagnant water and sewage. In these worker neighborhoods, 15 households totaling 80 to 90 people share one outdoor water pump, one primitive outhouse, one gas stove with 3 or 4 burners. There is never any privacy. The women bathe under a water pump with their clothes on.
Wal-Mart claims they have a commitment, an advertising commitment. They're going to roll back prices constantly. Well, what they're doing is they're rolling back human rights standards all around the world. They're rolling back wages and benefits all around the world.
Walmart's $219 billion a year in sales exceeds the government revenues in Bangladesh by 55.5 times.
What happens when workers ask that their rights be respected? Young teenage women in Bangladesh sewed these Disney garments for 8 years under abusive sweatshop conditions. These women finally had enough, and they stood up and they asked that their most basic rights be respected. They wanted to be treated like human beings, not like animals. So they said to Disney, stop the beatings. Give us 1 day a week off. Pay us our wages correctly. Pay us our maternity benefits correctly. Disney's response was to pull its work from the factory, to cut and run, and to throw the women out on the street with nothing, penniless. The message that Disney was delivering, not only to the women in the Wal-Mart factory, but all across Bangladesh to 1.8 million garment workers, and indeed throughout the developing world, is that if you dare ask that your most basic rights be respected, you too will be fired and thrown in the street with nothing.
After working 20 years in the factory, I was told that my eyesight wasn't perfect anymore, and I couldn't meet my quotas the way young workers could. When they finish using you, they just throw you away like an old rag. They eventually fired me.
Exploitation of children is nothing new, but in Bangladesh, parents actually offer their children for work. Aren't some of them a bit too young to work?
No, there's no problem. There's no risk.
According to the latest survey, it's estimated that nearly 5 million children are working in Bangladesh.
If you take a look at these ads here, which are targeted at U.S. companies to convince them to go offshore, to access the low wages in El Salvador or other countries, you'll see the wage 57 cents an hour if you would go offshore. A year later, the wages are down to 33 cents an hour. You can hire Rosa Martinez. This is the corporate agenda. And a part of that corporate agenda is to pit young workers in the third world against workers in the United States. We're pitted to be pitted against each other in a race to the bottom. Who will accept the lowest wages? Who will accept the least benefits? Who will accept the most miserable working conditions? This is a plan. This Gap shirt was made in El Salvador. See the price tag, $20 US. In fact, 40 workers in El Salvador in one day produce 1,500 of these shirts. $20 times 1,500 shirts is $30,000. The workers in El Salvador earning 56 cents an hour, they make, all the 40 workers collectively, they make $180 for the day. In other words, the women in El Salvador get paid 12 cents for each $20 Gap t-shirt.
They're not helping the economic situation over there. They're giving slave wages, and they're bringing that garment back and selling it for a high price to Americans.
What are the American people going to buy these products with? Because we're not going to have jobs. We're going to be unemployed.